Before we start, let's have a brief summary on the topics we will be discussing in Lesson 8. Lesson 8 has three topics, which are Sikolohiyang Filipino, True versus False Self, and the Self as Proactive and Agentic. For the part 1, let's talk about Sikolohiyang Filipino, True versus False Self, and the introduction to Self as Proactive and Agentic. At first, Filipino behavior has been studied and evaluated in the light of Western theories for years. The vision of the Filipino has been distorted, if not false, as a result of these notions, which are inherently culturally constrained. Many intellectuals in the Philippines have expressed discontent with Western observers' negative views of the Filipino character. Sikolohiyang Pilipino, according to Enriquez in 1975, it's now based on Filipino ways and deep insight as seen from a Filipino point of view. The Filipino orientation is the most essential feature of this description. It is based on the Filipinos' experiences, thinking, and perspective. It's a process of indigenization from the inside, in which the indigenous people's experiences are used to develop a framework and methodology.
The life and contributions of Virgilio Enriquez. Virgilio Gaspar Enriquez was born on November 24, 1942, in the province of Bulacan, Philippines. He is widely known as Doc E, was a Filipino social psychologist, and is considered the father of Sikolohiyang Pilipino, Filipino psychology. He was the youngest of 5 children of Arsenio Liberan Enriquez and Rosario Galvez Gaspar. Virgilio Enriquez is the founder of Pambansang Samahan sa Sikolohiyang Pilipino. His research interests included indigenous psychology, Filipino personality, psychology of language and politics, philosophy and values, cross-cultural psychology, and Filipinolohiya, Philippine studies. As a consequence of his studies and discoveries, psychology has gradually acquired acceptability in the Philippines and other non-Western countries. Enriquez made several contributions to psychology, particularly in the areas of Filipino values and culture. There is a sense of identity loss and cultural theft as Western traditions are embraced, as there is in many other colonial countries. After completing his PhD in the United States, he returned to the Philippines to work on creative teaching techniques with the University of the Philippines and to do research on Philippine psychology and increasing creativity and inventiveness in Filipinos. Enriquez aided in the organization of the first National Conference of Filipino Psychology and the establishment of Philippine Psychology Research House, PPRH, which later became the Philippine Psychology Research and Training House. This location became the library for resources on Sikolohiyang Filipino, which has grown to over 10,000 references. Later on, from 1977 to 1982, Enriquez served as the chairman of the Department of Psychology at the University of the Philippines. He continued to inspire and urge students to embrace the Filipino language and culture, advancing Filipino psychology and the national languages continuation. He died because of cancer on August 31, 1994 at the age of 51 in San Francisco, California.
Rethinking Filipino Values. Filipino values are the set of values that majority of the people in the Philippines have historically held dear in their lives. These values define the personality or traits of Filipinos. Enriquez believed that the way other people understand some of our values is wrong, which is why Enriquez urged Filipino scholars to reconsider these values with a Filipino perspective. Lagmay, Salazar, and Bonifacio did their own research. The first Filipino values is bahala na. Bahala na is an expression used by Filipinos when they are in a challenging situation. This Filipino cultural value has no exact English translation. Thomas Andres still defines bahala na as the Filipino attitude that makes him accept sufferings and problems, leaving everything to God. However, in Filipino perspective, They use this phrase in a positive context. Bahala na means determination and risk-taking. They are telling themselves that they are prepared to face a difficult situation ahead of them and that they will do their best to achieve their goals. Next is hiya. Hiya, or shame in English, is defined by Lynch as the uncomfortable feeling that accompanies awareness of being in a socially unacceptable position or performing a socially unacceptable action. This definition ignores that Filipino use different affixation to express themselves. With some affixes, it becomes negative. For example, is napahiya or embarrassed in English. With others, positive. Example is mahiyain or shy in English. And in still other forms, it can either be positive or negative depending on the context. Next is utang na loob. Kuut translated utang na loob as debt of gratitude. Andres defined it following Kaut's logic as the principle of reciprocity incurred when an individual helps another. It is a sense of obligation to return what you owe from someone. This denotes that if a person helped you, you will feel obligated to return the favor. It can be through gifts, money, etc. But when we look at it in Filipino context, utang na loob actually means gratitude or solidarity. It is not a debt or an obligation from someone, but it is the Filipino pattern of interpersonal relations. Filipinos believe that there is always an opportunity to reciprocate someone's kindness.
Pakikisama versus pakikipagkapwa. Pakikisama is the English equivalent of maintaining smooth interpersonal interactions. It also means getting along with others. It encourages companionship and maintains a harmonious relationship. Pakikipagkapwa is a term that refers to the concept of kapwa, which means shared identity. It generally means treating other person as kapwa or fellow human being. Take note that the kapwa is considered the heart of Sikolohiyang Pilipino. Kapwa has two category levels, which are ibang tao means outsider and hindi ibang tao means one of us. These two categories are further classified into different levels. Ibang tao or outsider category levels. Pakikitungo, level of amenities or civility. Pakikisalamuha, level of mixing or interaction with. Pakikilahok, level of joining or participating. Pakikibagay, level of conforming in or accord with. Pakikisama, level of adjusting or being along with. Hindi ibang tao or one of us category levels. Pakikipagpalagayang loob, level of mutual trust and rapport or acceptance with. Pakikisangkot, level of getting involved. Pakikiisa, level of fusion or oneness and full trust or being with.
Indirect communication. Filipino personality has given attention by Sikolohiyang Filipino perspective. It is a part of our socialization that being attended to nonverbal cues, caring about others' feelings, being truthful but not to hurt others. This has made the sharpening of pakikiramdam or shared inner perception a particularly desirable skills in many situations involving Filipino social interaction. Pakikiramdam is a request to feel or to be sensitive to. It is a shared feelings, a kind of emotional priority. In other words, it is a feeling for another, exercising great care and deliberation. This kind of communication of Filipino resulted in directness in verbal exchange, expressive body language, voice intonation that say more words than other similar behaviors. This behavior come conflict with westernized Filipino because they are impatient with this mode of communication and question the usefulness of these cultural ways. Internality, externality. Salazar 1985, his analysis about indigenous history and culture of Filipinos shows the internality-externality components in their personality. Example, the English word honor. To Filipino language, it has two words, puri and dangal, where puri means compliments or praise your physical performance, while dangal refers to the virginity of unmarried Filipino women, or dangal is honor from within knowledge of one true worth, character, achievement, and success. Other example of internality externality includes saya and damdam means happiness, pigil and timpi means control, dama and damdam means feel.
A cultural divide is the virtual barrier caused by cultural differences that hinder interactions and harmonious exchange between people of different cultures. Internal causes of cultural divide are causes based on innate or personal characteristics of an individual, such as a personal way of thinking, an internal mental structure, or habit that influences how a person acts. A big contribution for this is the person's culture. In his examination of Filipino mentality in 1992, Enriquez also looked into the concept of the Great Cultural Divide. Filipinos who have retained a more mass-oriented worldview, culture, and way of life are on the other side of the cultural split. Those Filipinos, on the other hand, have a more elitist perspective based on the cultural divide. True versus false selves. An authentic sense of self, as well as the feeling of being truly present and alive, is known as the true self. The false self, on the other hand, is a defensive facade behind which a person can experience emptiness, and it's a set of learned and controlled behaviors rather than authentic and spontaneous ones. Let's discuss 8 perspectives about the false self. For Sigmund Freud, our personality is a battle between two influences: our spontaneous impulse and our internal control over impulses. For Karen Horney, the false self is equivalent to our idealized version of ourselves. Alfred Adler sees the false self as a result of our safeguarding instincts in order to protect ourselves from embarrassment and inferiority. For Eric Fromm, humans adopt strategies. Examples of these are automation conformity, which is to act like everyone else, authoritarianism, destructiveness, and individuation. According to Harry Sullivan, the false self is the result of two unique security operations: dissociation, which is the thoughts, desires, and demands that a person refuses to acknowledge, and selective inattention, a defense in which threatening experiences are subconsciously ignored or forgotten. Carl Rogers' theory is more focused on the thought that the closer our self-image and ideal self are to each other, the more consistent or congruent we are, and the higher our sense of self-worth is. For Skinner, the consequences of one's actions and behavior can be used to influence his or her behavior and personality. And lastly, in an evolutionary perspective, the true and false self exists as a result of its evolutionary value.
What is proactive and agentic self? Proactive behavior refers to the actions that we take to achieve a specific result. Self-initiated conduct that attempts to remedy an issue before it occurs is referred to as proactive. We frequently act with the best intentions, but we always anticipate the outcome. It also refers to the taking charge of events and initiating early changes rather than reacting to circumstances or waiting for anything to happen. On the other hand, the agentic self functions adversely affected by the generating, planning, selecting, and implementing the capabilities of an individual. It's also known as the component of human personality that dictates how one's ambitions, intentions, and activities are evaluated in the future. According to Zimmerman and Shong 2003, humans are the agents of their self-development, who can adopt and self-regulate to achieve their desired future. Humans have control over their self-development according to the view of Bandura.
Proactive self versus agentic self. Proactive people are people who always have a plan to future activities, projects, events, and any possible outcomes. They are acting ahead and planning of what actions they will take. They are controlling the situation ahead to avoid responding to it after it happens.